front of it?
Are they holding in there,
Showered and shaved.
It's new for him too.
Call to order the meeting of the Washington County School Board for March 30th, 2020. We do have a quorum and that 5 school board members are present here at the school board office. We also have Mr. Brooks and Mr. Flinger on there participating by remote location by telephone, so they'll be able to be part of the discussion tonight. We're going to try to move through the agenda and be as efficient as possible. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Ratliff, ask you to lead the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 1.04, approval of the meeting agenda. Dr. Ratliff.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman and other board leaders, you have before you some changes in the agenda. Most of the agenda tonight will have some sort of relationship to COVID-19. We will do some business matters, and you'll see some of the additions that are here are also include some consent agenda items that we thought the board could do from a business standpoint.
Chair, I move we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Lowe and a second by Mr. Henderson that we approve the agenda as amended. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. It's unanimous. I also like to say I'd like to welcome the public tonight viewing by live stream. I know this is a little different than what we normally do, or a lot different than what we normally do. So we just wanted you to be able to participate and hear the conversation and see the conversation. And as I said before, we're going to try to be very efficient and try to protect ourselves and our staff and get everyone out here in a timely manner. Item 2.01 is public comment. We had that on the agenda. No one has signed in for public comment, so we'll move on to item 3 is consent agenda. And there are 9 items on the consent agenda. Is there any item that we'd like to remove and talk about specifically? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Henderson and a second by Ms. Hamilton that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's unanimous. Thank you. Item 4.01, grade point average, valedictorian and salutatorian. Dr. Noel.
Chairman, music, members of the board, brought this to your attention and have some discussion to maybe get permission to vary from what this policy states and be our practice and or procedure for valedictorian and salutatorian determination. By policy, typically, that is not determined until the very end of the academic year, and given the situation in school ending in, or at least student attendance ending, thought it might be more wise to have that determination made at the end of the first semester, given the barriers of students completing their academic work as what would typically be the case.
Do you need a motion for us to?
I would think at least approval from the board to vary from policy.
And within the guidelines of what the Virginia Department of Education has laid out, including the State Board of Education.
Right.
Mr. Chair, I move that we vary from our stated policy and that calls for naming the valedictorian and salutatorian at the end of the second term for seniors, and that we go to the first semester in accordance with guidelines from the Department of Corrections and due to the current state
Corrections, did I really say that?
Wow, that was a different light.
That was a different light.
The Department of Education, and that the, now I lost it. I'll stop there.
That covers it.
I
Second.
have a motion by Ms. Lowe and a second by Ms. Hamilton that we alter the policy and meet the guidelines of the DOE. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Motion's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, board. That'll be for the benefit of our students in this unusual time, for sure.
Item 5.01, graduation, discussion information, Dr. Rattler.
Yeah, I'll lead and have Dr. Noe join us for waiver requirements or any questions that you might have regarding graduation. Tonight's discussion is not about graduation exercises or ceremonies. We've put that notice out to our general public, and for those watching live stream, we'll hear that again tonight, that has not been decided. Some things may change. We may hear additional information from the Department of Education tomorrow. We have our Tuesday morning meeting at 8:30 that all superintendents in the state and the Commonwealth of Virginia will participate in, and it's also again on Thursday. So given the new order, we can talk about in a few minutes, but given that new order or additional clarification to the stay-at-home order, there may be some adjustments made there, but right now we have not made a decision to cancel graduation. We'll do everything we can within our power, and I know this board is willing to do the same, to honor, as I said on Friday, to honor our graduates and do everything we can at such time that we're able to do so. That's our desire as well, certainly. That's what we all kind of live in this room and the general public, and certainly our seniors and their parents. That's what we live for at that moment. So understanding that, what we're going to talk about is just to let folks know that the graduation requirements, we've received guidance and real now direction about certain things with for graduation requirements, awarding of credits, and continuity of learning, and we'll talk about some of that in my future update. But as far as graduation requirements, there's been a considerable number of waivers. Dr. Noe had mentioned the barriers. Some of what the state superintendent now has been given is the authority to waive certain requirements, and the Board of Education can. There are two items that only can be waived by the General Assembly, and I'll go ahead and get those out so in case I forget them. So the graduation requirements that require action by the GA in order to be waived are the students who have not completed training in emergency first aid, and that's CPR and the use of AEDs and those kind of the hands-on practice of the skills for CPR. And then some people don't realize that our graduates have that requirement. And then the second one is students who have not completed a virtual course. We cannot speak for the General Assembly. They're not slated to reconvene until April 22. And we still don't know how that's going to happen and work in Richmond, but that's on schedule to occur on April 22nd. But we have been told not to worry about that waiver, of course. So the ones that really affect and could be barriers that Dr. Noe had mentioned earlier in terms of graduation requirements have all been waived. That includes anything with SOL testing, any verified credits, standard credits. That doesn't mean carte blanche they can graduate without having earned the requirements and the credits to graduate. What we have done, and Dr. Noe can speak more clearly about this, is that we have identified those individuals who may have been in danger of not graduating as of March 13. It's not our graduates' fault that they no longer were in school as we've known it in the traditional school setting. The school closure began for a 2-week period, as you know, on March 16 through 27, and now it's for the remainder of the balance of the academic year. So if someone has been identified as an individual, one of our students who is not on track to graduate, there's all kinds of waiver opportunities for them and opportunities for us to give them the ability to graduate. Our goal is to be able to graduate those who could graduate. Is that a good way to put that?
Yes, it is.
So as far as graduation, we do think that our graduates have done, our seniors have done the lion's share of their work to do so. And at this time, we're not aware of individual students that absolutely cannot graduate. If they were in that situation, that just means they were just at the point to where it was down to one variable or one factor or one piece that it may keep them from graduating. And at this point, we don't think that we have any of those students in line that I've been made aware of. We do have students that are going to need to finish some requirements and can improve. Is that correct?
Yes, then we have some that need to do some work to get there.
And it'll be on them to do that. We'll give them, we'll afford them every opportunity to earn their graduation, so.
Mr. Chairman, one question. Dr. Adams, we talked about, as a staff, you talked about pass, fail, or continue with the grade A, B, C, D.
For graduating seniors,
Yeah.
would you like to address that?
We'll need to have a numerical grade, or at least an alphabetical grade, put into the student's transcript and into the records to pass fail. All grades are going to be based upon, at beginning, what they had done to that, in that course at the point that we ended school on the 13th. They can improve their grade for the remainder of this year if they have the opportunity and access to do work. They can improve their grade, but will not hinder a grade. We're in the process of contacting those persons who, students and their families who maybe were in a difficult position on March 13th toward passing a class, and stressing to them what they need to do in order to complete successfully.
That's great.
Just one further, there's a separation between standard credit. What really the school divisions plan for is to make sure we don't prevent student promotion to the next grade level or sequential course. I'll talk about that. That's more of a K-11 issue that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But in terms of verified credit, there is the opportunity to be awarded a locally awarded verified credit. You already have in place a policy that we feel like meets those requirements, and you do not have to make adjustments for those. You've already done your work there. So there is some latitude. Any other questions or anything else that I'm missing here?
No, I do need to ask for waiver of policy IKFB, which designates the graduation date. I think it's in your information. It says it will be at the end of school, and you know, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when you hold it. I would request from the board permission to waive the effect of this policy, so that once we do know a point when we can schedule graduation, we can move forward with that. It will not be at the end of school, but at some point we hope to still be able to try to schedule those ceremonies.
To waive, what's the policy?
Waive the requirement of policy IKFB that says graduation is at the end of school, and it's either on the week before or the week after, depending on which day of the week it falls on. We don't have that end of school, and with the governor's order, if it stays in place, we would not be able to hold a ceremony on what would have been our last day of school. So as soon as we do know of a time, we would have to waive this policy to schedule graduation ceremonies.
Mr. Chairman, we waive policy. Graduation.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Henderson and a second by Ms. Lowe that we waive policy file IKFB, graduation ceremony, and that will all be done not at that particular time, but hopefully as soon as possible.
Yes.
Any further discussion?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Should we clarify in that motion that the waiver is just for this academic year?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's a
Yeah,
good
thank
question.
you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Slater.
And my question, Mr. Chair, is just clarifying that we will be waiving certainly those dates that are tied, the days of the week that are tied to the end of school, and any other, I don't know what other kinds of provisions of that policy may change too.
I don't know either. The policy speaks to who would be student speakers at graduation. That could be impacted by availability and other factors as well. But I don't think it is so stringent enough that it would keep you from having a class officer speak as well as 3 honor graduates. I think that's still doable. Hopefully it would be.
Your motion would add this academic year, right?
Waive final IKFB graduation ceremony for the current school year.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, Board. That will help us not just flexibility for this academic year, this unusual year, and it also gives us a little bit of time, flexibility-wise. We can always come back to you if there's going to be a change in those dates, and if there's a possibility for those exercises, we can communicate those to you and to the public.
Okay. Item 6.01, fund summary. I think we actually have two of them for review and approval. So those were posted on board docs for your review. Are there any questions or concerns from Ms. Caudell? I have a motion to approve the fund summary.
Second.
Have a motion by Ms. Lowe and a second by Mr. Henderson to approve the fund summary as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's unanimous. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, do we need to, on the valedictorian, salutatorian, do we need to say the same language for this year on? Just a point, if we did it for one policy, then we probably should just amend that motion to
Yes,
include.
back on, yeah,
I'm good with that.
Thank you. Back on item 4.01, that policy also, we're all in agreement that that would be for just the current school year. So I don't think we, and let the record reflect. Thank you, Ms. Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Item 7, superintendent's report. Dr. Rapp.
I'll go ahead and work on budget then. On the first item then, Mr. Chair, the FY21 budget, and then I'll circle back, if you don't mind, just to cover this current year budget in case there's any questions about that. And I'll tell you what I know at the time, which can change with little to no notice, as we all know. But the FY21 budget for next year, we're really have been told just by general guidance, it could change tomorrow morning at 8:30. We've been told to follow our calculation tool that's been given to us from the state. That's based on what was adopted from the state budget with the General Assembly. Having that out there, we also need to understand and be reminded that on April 11th, the governor is slated to give amendments. The budget sits on his desk, and he will make those amendments, and those will come back for reconvene session with the General Assembly on April 22. I have no idea what that will look like. You know, you hear all kinds of things of what that might transpire. I think a lot of that has to do with how long this goes, and certainly what kind of sales tax revenues and other revenue, state revenue money is affected by this. There's all kinds of conjecture. That's all we have at this point. But right now, we've been told to continue to build that. We do not have your budget books ready for that, but we will continue to work on that. I do think that tomorrow, Thursday, will give us some better guidance. Right now, we are still planning on developing a budget. The only difference that we had is that part of what we discussed with you out of the budget that was passed was that there was 2% for both years. So that would include a 2% increase for the biennial budget for employees. Well, it's supposed to be for SOQ positions, but we went ahead and told you that that would be for all employees on both of those years. But again, I think it would be prudent for us to sit tight for a little bit on that one. Was there anything else, Mrs. Caudell, that we needed to share with them about FY21? Basically, and only from a local standpoint, is that Mr. Music can speak a little bit better than this. Only Mr. Berry and I have been in constant communication about a lot of things. And I'll tell you about one of those in the current year budget. But for next year's, for the next biennial budget, is that the Board of Supervisors had passed, tentatively approved to for our statement of needs to give us local level funding from the previous year's amount of local contribution for the schools for this biennial budget for the next year. And so that's all we have right now. It's a tentative approval, and again, I think people are just waiting to see, but they did take care of that, and I think they've been in contact with Mr. Music.
Dr. Brandon, speak. You can comment.
Yeah, I just had one comment. The only thing that worries me about the state is that they start talking about all the monies and expenditures that they've had. And the only question I would want to make sure that we ask is that, what about the federal money you're going to get to replace your general fund money? So if you're getting replacement money to replace your general fund money, then why should you tout this epidemic or pandemic to take money away from the schools? So that would be, you know, and I'm sure you've thought of that, but, you know, that's just one thing that, if it does get tough and they start bringing questions up and crying the blues and saying we're losing this, losing all this money, but with the stuff I've read, it looks like the federal dollars could replace some of the state dollars. So just to make sure that education doesn't get stuck on the end again of saying because of a cut or because of a pandemic, then we have to cut the education budget.
Yeah.
Whenever they really, sort of like the lottery money, you all know,
Very
it's
much
gone
like
over the years.
Very
You know,
much
they
like that.
supplanted it and then said, well, we can't give it to you because of that, so that's my.
No, that's a good point, and and to that point, furthermore, would be that we have been told that there would be a certain portion, it looks like about 43% of the federal money would come toward K-12 education. That could look like an estimate of upwards over $200 million, but we have not seen how that's going to be broken down yet, so we're afraid, we don't want to be careful and cautious, not to say too much of those details, but Dr. Brandon's right, there will be a federal stimulus package that's already been, already been one put together, and that money will be coming our way. How much, when, what can be supplanted, how it can be used, we don't know yet. Is there anything else that you've got, Ms. Calden? Thank you. Go ahead.
I just want to let the board know, Mr. Ball did call me this morning. He volunteered to come to the board meeting tonight to answer any questions we had, and I told him I really appreciated that. I didn't think there was a need at this point in time, but we continue to have very good communication with one another, and you know, their board seems very supportive of what we're doing, and I think there's, you know, at the meeting they had, there was a 5% number came up, and that was, I think that was just cautioning everyone to be conservative. It wasn't come across and ask anybody to cut. We're just saying, you know, just use a conservative number, so, because we don't know exactly what revenues are gonna be, so, you know, everyone to remain on the conservative side, and they're gonna do, you know, they've told us they're gonna do everything they can to help us, and I'm sure in this year and the coming year, so, feel really good about the process and how things went, and the support from our board of supervisors this year.
And if I don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'd like to use that as a segue into the current year budget, and Board of Supervisors, Mr. Berry's communication has been outstanding. Had good conversations, we've talked just about every day, it seems like. But the current year budget, there's, we are remaining the same until we're told otherwise, just like the other. We don't know of anything different unless we're told that basic aid will not be made whole, and there's some sort of prorated payment schedule, which we have not heard one word about. And we're into the last quarter. We're about 2 months behind on state sales tax revenue, so we're just having to monitor that at this point. But right now, as long as basic aid's being made whole, we'll be able to finish out, of course, pay all our bills and do all that as normal, meet payroll. So that's part of that. The other one, as I mentioned, is the monitoring of sales tax revenue. We'll have to watch that. It looked like our sales tax revenue projections were really good until this hit. And I'd already shared some of that with you. Same thing with ADM and enrollment. We haven't been given exact guidance on that yet. Dr. Noe and I talked about it today, and Ms. Caldwell and I talked about it a couple of times, is that the only thing we know, that's usually a March 31 ADM calculation and projection that's made, we assume, and we'll have to be careful with that as well, that'll be made as of March 13th, because that was our last day until there was mandatory closures. But more to come on that as we learn. I think Dr. Brandon's point about potential stimulus and how that comes federally and how that's packaged to us. We just have to keep a close eye on that to make sure that that doesn't get out of kilter and that we don't get put back in the line. I think he had a good way of saying that. Current budget also, one last thing is, in light of what you just shared about being conservative and watching our numbers, are part of what we're doing that we do. We just already on it. Ms. Caldwell worked over the weekend and continues to work on this. If we can get payroll straightened out and squared away and understand how things, this moving target's working. She's already working on cash flow management. She's already getting information out to the respective departments. So we'll follow suit with that and sure there'll be savings on one hand and there may be loss of revenue on the other. We'll continue to monitor that and we'll make sure that you're well kept up to speed on that as well. That's all for budget. Moving on to 7.02 then, VSBA, just to remind you that that had been canceled. No surprise there. It's right next door. We had, we were happy that we were just going to be able to exit 35 or wherever that is, and now that's changed. And so VSBA will not be coming to that meeting. I don't know if it'll be Zoomed or not. We're all learning how to Zoom like no one's business around here. May I move on, sir? 7.03, the end of academic year and COVID update. I do want to make just a couple of quick comments about that and just kind of walk back where we've been, where we are, kind of things, not a history of anything. I won't take time to do that tonight. We don't have time to do that because we keep moving and it changes. I will say this to you, board, that you already know, and I appreciate some of the encouraging comments. I want to tell you as board leaders, and Mr. Fleener, Mr. Brooks, I know you can hear me say this, is how encouraging and supportive you all have been. It's just been amazing. It doesn't surprise me at all that you're that way, but I appreciate that. Also with the community, it's just been, you know, I've written a few things about that, but I just, with all sincerity, our community is just incredible. I mean, we've had people not just asking how they can help. It's not just that. It's like I said in my letter on Friday, it's the mindset. It's the sense of unity. It's the sense of trying to understand and patience, trying to figure this out. We've likened it and jokingly have said it's like building an airplane as you fly it, but it really is that way, and it has been that way. There's no victim talk. We're taking responsibility language around here. The expectation is that we do the best we can with the available resources that we have and with the best information we have in that moment. And if it changes, our attitude has been, okay, here we go. So there are temporary new norms, and then there are going to be new norms, and for the future, school life's going to be different. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be bad. So my encouragement to all of us as leaders and our whole school community is that we have that mindset, that this could end up being a situation where we're going to get better. We're just going to be better from it. And one thing we talk about, and it'll be enough of my editorializing on this, is that we talk about, it's kind of a John Maxwell quote. Some of us have used this one over and over, and I'm not big into that so much as this whole notion that adversity builds character. We know that. Crisis makes us build character. Sometimes we don't really can measure that in the moment, but one thing that we always can do is it reveals it. It reveals things to us. So adversity, crisis, it reveals something about us. It reveals something about our community, and most of which has just been outstanding. But it also reveals about our preparedness. And so these are all good things. So I just want everybody, particularly our board leadership, to continue to be heartened by that what it does is reveal to us what we need to continue to work on. We hate that it's happening in this manner, and it's very difficult for the entire world. It's a global issue, it's a national issue, and like I said, it's a community issue, and it hits home with us. It's been very, very difficult. So for us to act like that we have a handle on that would be a misrepresentation. It wouldn't be truthful with our public, and that's what we're bound to do, is to walk in integrity and to share the information that we have, and with the best information we have to be able to move forward. And I'm actually heartened by the fact that our folks are understanding that, and we're making moves to get better, even in the midst of a crisis. So I did want to say that. In terms of the closure, the big areas have been, and we've addressed those as big areas. There's lots of questions that will even stand tonight that will remain unanswered. I don't have answers for them. You don't have answers for them. No one, the few people that are in the room don't have answers for those questions, all of them, but we're getting them. And then when they change, then we report that. And so we can't chase every change and every maneuver. What we do is just stay the course. What we do know is that we were closed for the initial 2 weeks. And during that time, as you're aware, we provided instructional planning and delivery looked a little differently. As soon as we were aware that we'd be closed for the balance of the academic year, it became more of a focus on what I'd said earlier, that our focus needs to be on making sure that students are prepared the best that we can to be promoted to the next grade level and or to the next sequence in their coursework. And in order to do that, we need to identify, first of all, structure our time as best we can with the resources that we have, and that's hybrid, as you've seen. That can change tomorrow too because of some of the stay-at-home measures. There could be some other issues and other restrictions that we once again need to adapt, and it's okay. We'll do what we can. We'll do the best we can. But there's the delivery of instruction is going to be really, well, not the delivery, the focus on instruction will be now for those essential knowledge pieces, those concepts, those things in which we had not covered. There's good news and bad news with testing always, and I know there's lots of feelings about testing, but the good news is this, part of the good news, part and parcel, is that much of our instructional time was already moving toward the piece where we're preparing for our testing window. And so a lot of our instruction had occurred, and that's the good news. There are some areas that we have not covered, and we understand that, and it's going to look different. We have to do everything we can, as I said in my communication letter, is that with equity framework, and what I mean by that, our attempt is to provide the best education and understand what those gaps might be, and then try to fill those gaps. And that's what our focus is on in terms of instruction. The delivery, I'll talk about that in a moment. I want to make sure, Dr. Noe, anybody else, that I missed anything else about where we are with that, what we need to give instruction for. There are some options. One's probably off the table as of today, and I don't say that lightly. It's just one of the options is exactly what we're prepped to do and what we are currently doing. We have at least 2 spouses of teachers in here tonight, so you know what your spouses are currently doing to do this, and that is to deliver the instruction and meet those essential knowledges and concepts in order to fill in those gaps as best we can in what's left in this current academic year. There's a reason why we keep saying academic year instead of end of school year. So that academic year that will make that coverage. The other piece is that, I lost my own thought there with that, with the instruction. Oh, and then the next option would have been to extend this school year. Well, it's very obvious that that can't happen. If we already know we have a stay-at-home order until June 10, for us it's just impractical for us because that's total guesswork. And the third option, so we're already exercising option number 1. We can do a combination of these things. The third option would have been summer school, and I'm not saying would have been as if that's off the table, but again, there's no real clarity. So for us to act like we're going to plan that, we're not going to do that to our school community. What we're telling our school community is that we would love to have summer school. That's a way to be able to identify the needs that we have, and we will fill those gaps with summer school. So that still could very well transpire. But until such time that we have clear direction to where we could actually hold a traditional summer school, then we're not going to be able to do that. But that is another option that's still on the table. Realistically, I think it's fair, Dr. Noe, after our conversation with the state superintendent, Thursday I think it was, I think it's fair to say that the best, it's conceivable, it's June is going to be very difficult for us to even consider summer school. We're looking at at a July or early August summer program, whether it be transition, bridge, something like that. So we will work toward that end. Again, we'll investigate every opportunity we have to implement those things. Our staff stands, our colleagues are ready and willing to implement. It's just a matter of whether or not we can get some direction in that regard. The fourth option is to extend your next school year. And so if you look at the guidance, if you go on BDOE and you get that guidance, I've sent some of that guidance out your way so you could look at it. On the fourth option at this point, there may be a fifth or sixth coming, but the fourth one is to extend the next school year. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be 190 days instead of 180 days. We're not saying that. But there could be some extension programs. There could be some work at the beginning of the year that identifies these gaps to review to make that coverage as well. So those are the options that we have to work with as continuity of learning at this time. The delivery now is hybrid, as I mentioned. It's instructional packets, K through 2 for sure. We do not have the resources or the devices available. You can't even buy them, from what we understand. Right now, we are working really hard with this new order or additional restrictions of the order. It may complicate things over the next few working days, but we're working toward getting all of the Chromebooks that we have available and the devices to our students, understanding that it's going to be difficult from this point forward for repair and getting those back and things like that. We're not worried about that. What we're worried about is getting the appropriate materials and the resources to all of our kids to be able to engage in some hybrid instruction. So whereas before it looked like it was going to be more of a 6-12, it does look like we're going to go and do a little more even at the upper elementary level. So I know you're proud of them anyway, but I really want to tell you how proud I am of our colleagues. Our administrative staff here at the central office, Dr. Noe and folks, instructionally, our principals have done an amazing job. They've worked really, really, really hard. Our teachers they're getting after it. They're waiting to work. They want to do what they can. So I do think that we'll provide them the best that we have with the resources that we have. But I do want you to know that those are going to continue to be kind of I use the word hybrid, a combined fashion. And we'll learn more from this, and I'll have lots of future recommendations for you about going forward and what we can do with this. And we have lots of ideas, like I told you. It's revealed what you need to do, and I think it's going to give us good direction in the future to be on top of things. No one's done this, by the way. No one has. It doesn't matter what resources they have. And I don't mean that disrespectful to anyone, but if they say they have not. No one has done this kind of non-traditional schooling. And so everyone is learning. And so if you hear that it's one place and you start comparing, that becomes unfair. Our focus is, what do we have? What can we do for all kids? All kids. There's all kinds of, you mentioned the special education call today. There are 2 days in a row. The next 2 days are going to be, tomorrow's going to be full of Zoom meetings with special educators. We do think we're starting to get a handle on FAPE, on free and appropriate education, and offering our services to our special ed population, which is significant in Washington County, like in other places. We have a lot of needs that need to be met, and we're working toward that. And we feel confident that that first option that we're exercising is going to pay as much dividends as possible. We're going to make sure we're going to maximize our benefit. Right now, it's a little challenging doing that remotely under the guidelines, but we are working toward that end. For FY21 school year, I just don't even know what to tell you at this point. I don't think anyone can. There's anywhere from A to Z on that. It's whether or not we'll be able to start on time, we just don't know. Someone said this week, and I thought that was a good, we can't put a timeline on this COVID-19 situation. It's making the guidelines, it's making the timelines, not us. And so it won't be, I think it's the best advice is that I've been able to receive and hopefully share with other people is to continue to remain steadfast and calm and reassuring that we'll do everything we can with what we have. And the moment and going forward. And we'll be able to answer questions as we go. The SOL testing and requirements, that has been essentially waived. There are some processes that have to take place. So I want you to be aware, and I've shared some of that with you. So I don't want to take a whole lot more time, but I do want everyone to be aware that the SOL testing at the federal level there's been granted for state waivers, whereas before I think I mentioned to you that it looked like we were going to have to do school by school by school, and we will still have a checklist, but we've been told clearly that it'll be just that. It'll just be a checklist, and waivers, that those waivers will be removed, will be in place. So the SOL testing waivers will be secured. There is, however, going into next school year, there is a way through Pearson, through the window, the testing window, that we may be able to use for assessment purposes, which is good for our kids, for some of our students. And Dr. Noe and I talked about this, that might be something that we'll be able to tap into. So the good news about the SOL testing is that we might be able to use that, not for testing purposes for verified credits this year and all of that, but for assessment when we kind of need to know where individually, this is really going to be individualized, that we'll know exactly where our students are. So in some cases, we still may be able to use that as assessment tool.
So basically, it'd be like a benchmark.
It'll be like a benchmark. It'll be diagnostic in nature as best you can. It's not fully, so I'm not saying that, but it is another tool in the tool chest for us to be able to use. Anything else about SOL testing? I think all that's, the General Assembly's been incredibly supportive, and so we don't think that there's any issues. The Department of Education has already has already applied for a state waiver, and then individual school divisions and local educational agencies will be able to just do the paperwork on that. Is basically where we are. I don't know how else to say it. It's that simple. Okay, I do want to brag a little more on our colleagues before I move to the next section, is that, again, our teachers have just done an incredible job, by and large, with staying connected to our kids and trying to do that with the Privacy Act in place and making sure that there's not issues there. Tons of questions come out. I was telling Dr. Brandon before the meeting that we're getting questions about everything, about evaluations and about this and about privacy and about this. And some of those we're answering as we go. All of them we're answering them as we can. But overall, our teachers are trying so hard, they're working so hard to stay connected to our students. My daughter, English teacher, Franklin County, her husband, social studies teacher, Franklin County, one of the best conversations I've had with anyone about was with my kids, my adult children, who helped me understand. My daughter said to me, she said, whatever you do, Dad, I know you'll do this because you've taught us to do this, but whatever you do to make sure that the humanity side, the student-teacher relationship is fostered as best you can, because our kiddos need that. And our folks have just done an incredible job. I mean, we had board members, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but just, and I will tell you what Dr. Brandon shared with me. It's okay, because I thought it was so good. He shared with me, he sent me a text and said, hey, he said, I'm sitting here watching, listening to him. He wasn't watching, I don't think, but he was just kind of in the backdrop with his wife, who's an educator, interacting with kids, and there was laughter, and there was excitement, and there was energy, and inquisitive kind of nature. And Dr. Brandon reminded me, and I thanked him for that, reminded me that's what education is supposed to be about. That's engagement. That's not compliance. That's engaging instruction. So, but I've heard story after story after story about our teaching colleagues in particular, all of our colleagues, but our teaching colleagues, how they've stayed connected with kids. And we've asked with our students and their families as best they can. And I just can't say enough about all of them and the ready and willingness that we've had. We have continued, I'll go to meals, and I do think this is an important component. I'll try to hurry a little faster on this piece. But meals, we have been doing them 5 days a week. We have shifted to some school divisions, by the way, are talking about 1 day a week now. They're running out of resources and all of that. But we are looking at a transitioning next week. It could change. We've been told today, right after the governor's announcement, is that we'll continue to do meals, as you had mentioned earlier, Dr. Brandon, and we'll continue to have continuity of learning the best we can. But we had already planned to do a 3-day schedule, meaning that we would do Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. Make sure I have that right, Dr. Wallace. And with Monday being double meals, by the way, that'd be really like quadruple meals because we're already doing a combined meal. So when we do 1,800 meals, it's really like we're doing 3,600. And I don't know what Fridays was, but Thursdays was 1,800, so that meant 3,600 meals. We're feeding more students now than we ever did in a given day during the bricks and mortar kind of operation. So we are very, very busy, very proud of our folks. And the assistance and the cooperation that, as I mentioned in my letter to the public, has been amazing. Our parents have just been so good about following the rules, being there, picking up, helping us with delivery and pickup and those kind of things. But we will go to a Monday meaning a Wednesday doubled a day. Did I get that? No, I'm sorry. Wednesday would be a single day, and then Thursday would be a double day so that they don't miss any meals. And I'd mentioned that in my letter. Again, if things change, we'll make sure we post that to the website, and I'll make sure that the link is available for parents to see anytime, and then we'll notify them of any kind of changes that might be made. Again, we'll just have to await further guidance on that. I will tell you that there has been lots of conversations that's kind of out of our wheelhouse, and that would be with EBT cards and through the DSS. We have not gotten direction on that yet, but we will hear from those folks or from the state. And what that does is helps our families, and they maybe actually use cards for buying food and meals. That does not preclude us from continuing our delivery, so we'll do that as long as we can. So it'll be in conjunction with whatever the state or the federal government does with meal distribution. Is that fair enough?
Yes, sir.
Don't let me mess anything.
No, you don't.
Okay, all right. The other component that I do not have information, but I have received a lot of questions even from folks in the room about childcare for essential personnel. You've heard some of that from the governor. We've heard some of that from the state superintendent to be prepared. I had a conversation with Mr. Staten, with Travis Staten with United Way, who one of our board leaders works with United Way. We're awaiting additional information. We are ready and willing to do that. We've already let that be known from a public safety standpoint. We just have to get direction about how we might be involved. I mean, across the gamut, there's been community efforts and YMCA and all kinds of other, United Way, all kinds of other people involved in the provision of child care. Last count, I may not have this number right, but it was like 80,000 potential workers just in the healthcare profession and the emergency personnel alone that might have children 12 and under. And I don't know if I have that number. I told Travis, wasn't sure about that number. That was a number that was given to us on a conference call with the state superintendent. What that looks like across 134 or 130 some school divisions, I don't know. How many we have in this area that might be affected and where our need may come in. There have been questions about who pays for it, who hires them, who trains them, all of that. We need further direction on that, but we're ready to go. I mean, we will be ready and willing to do whatever and use our facilities for that when called upon to do that. We're prepared as best as we can at the moment with the information we have. Just a couple of things from COVID-19 update. There's constant communication. I had mentioned with the state superintendent. Now we've gone from a called meeting to a call or a webinar every Tuesday and Thursday, 8:30 to 8:30 on Tuesday and 8:30 on Thursdays. Those are relatively last about an hour, relatively speaking. I should say generally speaking is a better way of putting it. I've tried to keep you updated on what those calls look like and what the summaries, points of those. I'll continue to do that for you and with you. I have established, and I'll put out Zoom invitations unless something should change. I don't know why it would, because I can still do this remotely. So as we get information, I've asked the administrative staff to be prepared for me to engage with all of our faculties. And I'll start that on April 6, 7, and 8. And so in April, you saw in the agenda maybe that I sent to you, you'll see in April 6th that at this point, unless something changes, Mr. Lester will help me. We realized we had a 300 participation limit, which is good. That's beyond what we thought we had. So we should be able to cover all of our faculty, all high schools on Monday at 11 o'clock, and then all middle schools on Tuesday, April 7th at 11 o'clock. And then I have a combination, and I'll mess those up, Joe. I mean, it helped me. At 9 o'clock on Wednesday, April 9, I will be meeting with Valley Institute, High Point Elementary, Abingdon Elementary, and Greendale Elementary School. And then at 11 o'clock, I will meet with them by Zoom meeting. I will be meeting with the balance of those, which will be Ray Valley Elementary, Meadowview Elementary, and Watauga Elementary. So that should put us in a place where I can have personal contact as a school superintendent and with administrative staff to be involved in those meetings. And then the other thing that I had planned this week, we're working on this, is that I'd mentioned at least some video and or audio messaging to our general public. So they'll continue to get some summaries, but I think it'd be good for me to engage with our public in that regard. I'm not much of a camera guy, so I'll at least do audio, if not video. And we just, those details have not been ironed out. We will do what we can to maybe make those applicable to, if it gives an opportunity for me to talk with the students, I'll maybe do an elementary and then do middle and high at a different time. Those details have not been out, but I did want you to be aware that that communication is coming maybe even by the end of this week and certainly by next week. Spring break continues as planned. It just doesn't make sense for us to disrupt that. I'm sorry.
Just stay at home.
At home spring break will be as planned, and we're working on meals delivery. I think Dr. Wallace and Ms. Cupp has come up with a really good plan to make sure that we have good meals coverage then as well. The other thing I do want you to be aware of is that we'll work toward, and we had some discussions, some of those prior to the meeting tonight, about work schedules here. I don't have that out right now, but 12 months, just so you know, we're making sure we're following the guidance that we've received as best we can to work remotely some. We have been coming to the buildings. Even with this new order, you'll see that to and from educational institutions is allowable, but we will watch carefully and listen carefully to tomorrow's messaging from the state superintendent, how that might change the way that we do business as well. We have been very deliberate. It's difficult, but we've been very deliberate to work remotely when we can, and we haven't made the adjustment perfectly, but we're working on that to be available at our sites some, and making sure we're taking care of essential tasks and duties at our sites, but being fully compliant and respectful of all guidelines that have been done for the general public. So we'll continue to do that. Our instructional staff has been working remotely, as you know, pretty much all the time. We do have moments where we've had to have pickups and things like that, participation in meals delivery. So there have been people involved that we've been very careful to follow while we're delivering those services, to follow again the social distancing. There'll be lots of other questions about that. There's questions about handling paper, instructional packets. Dr. Noe and staff have done some safeguarding, been preemptive in that we would not ask for a return for those no matter what. While that's still in question about surface material and things like that, we're going to be highly cognizant of that before we would have that information be returned to us and handled by other people until we feel like it's safe to do so. The only other thing I wanted to mention about COVID, and then if there's anything that I've forgotten, please tell me, or any questions that you might have. The future board meetings will take guidance from our attorney about that. I think this one at the moment has been acceptable and is one of the options that we can use, and I've sent that information to you so you know that at this juncture that this is an acceptable way for us to continue to do business. It may change, and as we receive information, or you do from the SBA, or we do from our school board attorney, we'll make sure that we come together before we make arrangements to do anything that's out of compliance or just out of the general guidelines to do, as the governor's called on all Virginians to do the best we can to comply with those. Unless Dr. Noe or Mr. Lester, Ms. Caldwell, you all have anything else, or you have other questions?
Real quick, while you're talking about board meetings, we have a board meeting scheduled next Monday. Is there a need to have a board meeting next Monday, or try to push it out a couple of weeks for sake of better information?
Well,
I know we don't have but one meeting scheduled tonight.
It might, I hadn't really thought about that, and I don't have a recommendation. I work certainly at the will of the board. You all have some wisdom in that. As far as on the agenda, you can see what's on there. There are some things that I might be tasked to do, or you've already given me authority to continue, as long as you're comfortable with paying bills. We have to pay bills, and then we'll be really careful to make sure our closed meetings are for items that have to be done or taken care of. So with that, to answer your question, I do think that we could, now that we don't really have, we don't have a vast meeting in the end of April, we don't have really a spring break away from home. So if you would like to, and that we could wait until the time that we could meet after the governor's maybe at least given his amendments to the budget, or if you want to wait until after the General Assembly convenes. My suggestion would be, if we decide to do it that Monday after the General Assembly reconvenes, is that we stay prepared to have a call meeting if we need one. That would be my recommendation.
Would there be a need in just going ahead tonight and cancel April 6th meeting and go ahead and do that tonight so we can advertise that? I mean, unless you see a real need coming back in a week.
I'll look to the senior staff in the room, and then I'll work at your will and the individual board members' comments or questions about that, but I think we can do that.
Looking at the agenda, setting the calendar for next year's on there, we can't do that next week. We all know that. That will have to be later based on what we're trying to figure out about this year and how we do that. I don't know about the course approvals, what the timing on those is in order to get them in the pipeline. I think everything's changed pretty much lately.
CTE courses, those are kind of in-house moves, but
They are, and then the band courses, I think we're okay with that. It's just one school that emails right now.
So we could put that on.
we wait a couple weeks on this.
The special ed annual plan has to be turned in.
Yes.
Still like the same, okay. That would be the only thing that I think would be affected if we keep pushing it back.
As long as it's approved before the May deadline. Thank you for reminding us of that.
So we would need to meet in late April.
Are we okay at this time going ahead and cancel the 6th? Looking and giving the plan and giving plenty of notice. And talking to everyone, making sure that it'll work. Schedule a meeting later April.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get the 27th.
Everyone in agreement with doing that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brooks, Mr. Flainer, does that sound okay?
Yes, that sounds fine.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me.
Okay. All right. Dr. Adams, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know there's been a lot of questions, a lot of concern, particularly about pay for instructional aides. Would you just address that?
I'm always smiling at Dr. Wallace because we're on the,
Well, let folks know where we're at.
I'll tell you where we
Based on
are.
what information.
I'll tell you where we are at the moment, and then we're waiting legal counsel. I wouldn't want to, again, it's all about the integrity. What we're doing is knowing what we know at the moment, and what we might do might be adjusted by legal counsel. Right now, anyone who has been on payroll, certainly from a contracted employee standpoint, will remain on payroll. And now, this always has to do with whether or not we continue to see those, realize all of those payments from the state. That is always going to be a caveat or whatever, a disclaimer, a home office, it's really a caveat. But as far as those folks that are working in, like you had mentioned, a specific group of instructional assistants, they've been told that they will continue to be on as well. They continue to end up payroll. There are some other areas that we have to get legal guidance on before we make those decisions. I would not want to talk about any other areas at this point. But those hourly employees who work in those capacities, like an instructional assistant, regardless of how much time they're working in those, if it's on a regular basis, and they're in that employment agreement with us, they'll continue to get paid until such time that we would not have the money to pay for them. And we don't anticipate it, like I said earlier, that happening. So we will do what we can, or as long as we can.
So just for clarification, that is all, I mean, you said not only will they sign the contract, but if it's someone that's basically working part, I'm not trying to put you on.
No, that's all right.
Trying to
I'm just making
clarify
sure
so
I'm
I can-
answering it, right.
So I can answer questions. I mean, say they're working 25 hours a week and they continually do that.
They're still continuing to get paid.
I didn't mean to put you on. the
That's
spot.
okay, no, there are some areas where they're gonna be, they're not working on a regular basis, and it's all predicated upon, and that's where the legal counsel has to come in, predicated on whether working with a student or with students, like, for example, in a tutoring capacity. Certainly a substitute teacher wouldn't fall into that
Pretty much an
category.
as-needed basis.
Unless it's like a long-term substitute who's under contract to be a long-term sub, then they would be a different situation, and they would be considered in a contractual employment agreement with us for the rest of the year, so they would continue to get paid, but all the other folks would not be paid, no. Now, there is the whole issue of unemployment. I know that comes up, and there are lots of questions about that. I don't know much about unemployment. I do know that some things have been expedited from an unemployment office standpoint, and some of the waivers have been made for them to be able to be expeditious in paying people and getting them on unemployment. Obviously, the school system will be responsible for making unemployment payments. So either way, if someone is eligible for unemployment, they can apply for unemployment if they are not getting a paycheck from us through the remainder of the academic year or through a contract year, then they certainly could apply, and we're responsible for making those unemployment arrangements and payments as well. That's a different matter. It's a different payment.
Do we?
Make sure it's very confusing, and I know that we want direction out there, but we're still, for some classifications, we're waiting. We're gonna pay folks that are under contract or employment agreements for the rest of the year, in that capacity, in those capacities I just mentioned.
Do we know if administrators have been able to communicate the things that we are certain about in terms of payroll? Has there been confirmation that?
On Thursday, we had a leadership meeting, and they were told that information on Thursday, yes.
Okay.
So, but now, whether or not, I can't confirm that everyone has communicated what I just said to you. But by tomorrow, we should have that well
Okay.
communicated.
Great, thank you.
And if there, and so for your help in this, if there are specific questions about an individual that may contact you, have them call Dr. Wallace, please. That way they get the same answer, that we're evaluating that. Most of them is pretty clear cut. So I think the big one was the one that Mr. Music's brought up. There were concerns that you may have people that work in like a 29-hour instructional assistant, they're coming in every day. Now, having said that, anyone who's in those agreements with us, when the sun shines differently, we're going to be getting busy now. That's what I always tell them. We have work to do, so we need to have everybody available to do that. And some of those folks are helping remotely, as well, from an instructional standpoint. So a lot of our folks continue to work even in those capacities.
Thank you. Just good clarification.
That's what I can give you now.
I understand.
Now.
It's every.
I know it's frustrating because you have individual questions about that, but I would ask that we wait.
Well, I told you today, we put out an agenda Thursday, and since we put the agenda out, things have changed.
Yeah.
Just today, they have changed. Going to continue to.
And,
Yeah.
that, and, you know, that responsibility really needs to fall on those building principals. I mean, they need to do that. You all can't look at every situation, because I'm assuming whether they're 25, 29, or whatever, they're on a contract of some type, right? So really, those building principals, they need to pick up the phone and make a call and let them know, so that, you know, they don't get calls, you know, saying, am I gonna be whatever? They should be calling the principal, or the principal should be informed. So that's just one of those responsibilities. I'm sorry, you're the building principal, you need to, you know, make sure that you contact those people, because they know who they are even more. You'd have to flip through 300 names to figure out who you've got.
And we don't.
But I'm just saying, Dan.
You about have the number right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unique
So, you know,
situations.
that could really help out, and, on the days that they're working, they need to, you know, make sure they cover, because that's really the number one question for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, they-
I'll still say too, if you don't mind me adding, that, you know, even as of Friday, I got an update email from the attorney that we pay. And so I wrote her back and for clarification of who, what, where, and when.
How long?
And she said, we're still building the wing of that airplane. I'll let you know next week.
Yeah,
So
she likes that there.
And that's part of
That's
the
it.
problem is we're still, as you said, we're still waiting for some legal guidance on some of them.
We do think that some of those, most of them haven't been really questions, because they already assume that if they're in a particular area, that they're not gonna be, continue to get paid. So they just wanna be able to, that's the one, the few calls that you've
Right.
gotten have been that, is that they just wanna be able to apply for unemployment at this time, because everybody's scared and nervous about that, so we wanna help them. But tomorrow, and then our call on Wednesday, I have another leadership meeting on Zoom on Wednesday morning. So all this should be cleared up by then, one way or the other. So, but they are getting paid through this Friday, and then actually the next paycheck. So we're making sure that everybody's paid until that, like you had indicated, until that decision is clear and there's clarification that they will receive the paycheck. But all contracted employees at this point are being paid and will continue to be paid.
And we're in arrears of 2 weeks anyway, right?
2 weeks.
On
yes,
all
sir.
contracts.
Yep, 2 weeks. Yes, sir.
Item 8.01 is approval of the agenda for April 6th. I guess what I'll do at this time is just ask for a motion to cancel that April 6th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, we cancel like 6 meetings in the 20, we decided,
I just canceled.
let's cancel for schedule a later date.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Henderson and a second by Ms. Hamilton to cancel the April 6th, 2020 school board meeting, and will be rescheduled at a later date. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, it's unanimous. Item 9.01, update to the board. Anybody have anything you'd like to share?
I'd just like to thank all of our staff for all they've done. They've gone above and beyond everyone. And one other thing I'd like to do, we've had a lot of gloom and doom here tonight, but this artwork behind us is some good looking stuff, Mr. Music. And I feel like we should get somebody in here sometime and judge it for our kids. I know we won't be able to.
We're doing that today.
VSBA.
It's
I'd like
That's
to.
what
It's being done today, yes, sir.
I'd like to brag on that, and let's just keep everybody in our prayers.
Just shout out to food service. I mean, I've driven by and saw what they're going through every day,
Yes, sir.
you know, for what they're doing. They're preparing a lot of meals, so. And everybody else that's working, but, you know, that's pretty much still a mandate to provide food, so.
Mr. Brooks, you have anything to share?
Yeah, I'd just like to say a thank you to all the personnel and all the schools, but I've been involved in the distribution of the food and everything for the kids during this time. The help that's come in from the communities, and also all the workers here in our system's been tremendous, been very good. Just another note too, the young man John Seymour that lost his life in a motorcycle accident here just a few days ago. His mother, Susan Seymour, worked here for the school system for several years, and his aunt, Anita Taylor, was an employee here for several years. So we just want to remember them families in our prayers.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Fleener?
Just to echo the comments that have been made, the staff, teachers, principals, everybody has just done wonderfully through this situation, and I know the central office staff has been overburdened with things above and beyond. Just want to thank everybody.
Thank you. Sam?
No, I mean, thank you. I know it's not easy, and I'm here to help in any capacity. And that's it.
Our world has been rocked, and you all have stepped up. It's been amazing to see people working with our families and our kids, and I appreciate that very much. One quick shout out to one of our faculty members who is on the state superintendent's continuity for learning task force. They reached out, and she spent the last couple of days, I know, preparing for 3 days of virtual meetings. I spent an hour with her on the phone yesterday, and I know she's talked to Dr. Ratliff and Dr. Noe. That's Lisa Ford. I appreciate what she's doing there.
Yeah,
But,
she's in for some intense
yeah.
training here.
We've all had just major loss, I think, in this spring. We've had some major gains. You know, the loss for me is not bopping in and out of schools, but been spending a lot of time with my grandchildren, whose parents are first responders and healthcare providers. So we need to remember all the people out there who are, you know, going to work every day.
I just also like to thank everyone for everything you've done, particularly our leadership team for just adapting. I mean, it's just a constant adaptation. Every day it's something changing, and you think you've got it. You know, I don't think anyone has it figured out. If they do, they're a genius. But you know, you think you've got it planned, and you think you've got figured out what's going to happen, and then, you know, tomorrow it changes, or 2 hours from now it changes. So it's just a constant change and a constant adaptation to the situation. But, you know, I just think about our school kids and you know, particularly our seniors and losing their athletics, band, and all extracurricular activities the senior year. So, you know, we certainly haven't forgot about our students, and you know, I mean, I'm certainly going to miss Washington County Community Scholar. That's one of my favorite activities, I think, that we do throughout the year. So, you know, there's a lot of things, but you guys just hang in there, and it'll turn around, and it'll get better, and we're committed to doing everything that we can for the students and families of Washington County. There's no doubt about that. This board and this administration also.
Mr. Chair, I was going to mention something I told Ms. Hamilton in our SPED advisory committee today. I said, this is the Star Trek moment. We're going where no person's gone before in 31 years in education. I've never seen this. But we're getting it done. That's the key. That's the key.
I wanted to say something I think is always important for us to remember. Not that I have no insight. It's not, my wife reminds me of this. It's not insightful, because all this is going to be, as some of us have talked on the phone in person about, is that it's going to be so much more about hindsight, and because of exactly what you just said, Mr. Anderson. But I do think it's important for us as not leaders as in positional authority, because that means nothing now. And for someone to act as if it does, I'm afraid they might be missing the boat, and I would hate that, because I think that's an energy expenditure that's become wasted. But I do think it's important that you care for yourselves, because as I've said before, there's so many other people that need to be cared for. So I would just encourage this leadership and all of our folks to do everything they can to care for themselves, because we need to care for other people. We need to care for each other. And I know it sounds all nostalgic and all that, but it's just a fact that there's nothing we can do about, maybe we can't prognosticate, we can't forecast, we can't predict, but what we can do is stay steady and focused on caring about our humankind and caring for ourselves and making sure that other people are well taken care of. So that's just an encouragement from Brian's perspective, not as a superintendent matter. Thank you.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session after a 5-minute break.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board convene in closed session after a 5-minute break for the purpose of discussing the following matters authorized in section 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia, section 2.2-3711A, consider employment of specific individuals, teacher E.B. Stanley Middle, assistant baseball coach Patrick Henry, high school, teacher John S. Battle High School, assistant track coach Holston High School, athletic director John S. Battle High School, assistant track coach Patrick Henry High School, child nutrition assistant Abilene High School, superintendent's document A, athletic coaches, teaching and athletic coaches. Consider changes for working hours for specific individuals, child nutrition assistant, high school, 5 to 5.5 hours. Consider resignation of specific individuals, assistant cheer coach, teacher high school, school counselor high school, assistant football coach high school, bus driver transportation, assistant girls basketball coach high school, teacher middle school, custodian high school, nurse elementary school, head coach high school, bus driver transportation. Consider retirement of specific individuals, PM custodian elementary moved from supplemental retirement to retirement, instructional aide high school, teacher middle school. Consider long-term medical leave for specific individual in case number 4, comma 6. Also, consider specific individual with non-teaching assignments to receive coaching supplements only and subject to 1 VHSL approval, and 2 within number of positions approved for coaching, section 2.2-3711A1. Assistant soccer coach high school, assistant track coach high school, assistant baseball coach high school, assistant baseball coach high school, and assistant softball coach high school.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Henderson and a second by Ms. Hamilton to convene in closed session after a 5-minute break. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, thank you, guys.